lot of interviews, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want us to ask you questions? You want me to ask you questions? You
Yeah,
wanna...
sure. I don't
Okay.
care.
You don't
Whatever
care?
y'all want to do. I'll give you some kind of answer.
Okay.
When did you start collecting lunchboxes?
Well, I've collected anything and everything for over 60 years. I'll be 87 July the 10th. But I started collecting lunchboxes in 1985. I was at an antique show in Atlanta, Georgia, Don Scott's Lakewood Fairgrounds. And I came on a table, there was a Green Hornet and a Dick Tracy lunchbox on the table. And that reminded me of the old radio serials where I used to listen to the Green Hornet and Dick Tracy on the radio in my grandparents' house up in Social Circle, Georgia. And so it brought back many memories. And so I said, well, I'm going to buy those because it brought back great memories. And that really started the desire for me to say, well, I wonder how many more different lunchboxes are out there. And this is in '85. And then I found out, well, there are a lot of lunchboxes. So I started collecting them. And what really helped me was there was a story in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in the newspaper about a man who had collected over 600 lunchboxes and lived nearby in Atlanta. And when I read the story, I called the newspaper and found out who he was, where he was. I called him up and told him I'd like to come visit with him. And when I went to visit, I ended up buying the whole collection. So we filled up my van, and my wife was with me, Bonnie, and she got in her seat and filled her up with lunchboxes to here. So that was the first big collection I bought. It was about 600 boxes.
Oh my.
Back in '85. And so from then, it just mushroomed, and I said, we've got to find out how many metal lunchboxes are really out there. When was the first one? When was the last one? And so, of course, Rambo was the last metal lunchbox, as far as we considered at the time, as collectible lunchboxes. And of course, Hopalong Cassidy was the first.
That's
What
right.
happened when Hopalong Cassidy got on a lunchbox, the picture was only about that big.
That's right.
Now, nobody will remember this, not many people, but the television screen in 1951 was this big, the size of the Hopalong Cassidy on that lunchbox. So that started it all. And when Hopalong Cassidy got on the lunchbox, Gene Autry and Roy Rogers and everybody else says, hey, we got to do that too. We've got to get on those lunchboxes because the kids are carrying that TV show to school with them. What a great marketing promotion. And so then everybody that was on television and in any kind of personality, things like McDonald's and Walt Disney and you name it, they all wanted to be on lunchboxes because it was a great advertising tool for the kids taking them to school with them. So that's how I got started collecting lunchboxes. Then we had some actual lunchbox shows where we would meet with other fellow collectors and talk about the history of the lunchboxes. And then that was in around 1989 where we started having shows. And then I found out a guy named Bob Carr, Robert Carr in St. Louis, and he was a professor of psychology at the university up there in St. Louis. And he had a wealth of information. He had collected a lot of history on Aladdin lunchboxes and all the other lunchboxes that were being produced back in those days in the 50s and 60s. And what happened in around 1990, Bob Carr passed away. I heard that he had died. And so I called his car and told her that what was going to happen with the collection. She said it was going to be sold, that there were some people from New York that were coming to look at it, and also some folks in California interested. And this is about 800 boxes and thermoses, plus a lot of other tons of material. a little monthly newsletter called a paleontologist, and it was great on the history. So I told Ms. Carr I'd like to come up and see the collection and see if I could do something. So it was stolen, it was in December, that was stolen around in St. Louis, and I flew in and Ms. Carr picked me up at the airport, and we went out to the house, and I saw the big collection, it was all in the basement. And so after I sized everything up, I said, Ms. Carr, I know that it'll be hard for me to compete with buyers from New York and California, but I'll tell you what, I'll do something that I bet they won't do. I'll pay you a fair price, but I'll also write a book on lunchboxes and the history of lunchboxes, and it'll be dedicated to your husband, to Bob Carr and the family. That did it. She sold me the collection. I rented a big U-Haul truck in St. Louis and hired a couple of laborers. We loaded it up and I drove the truck back to Columbus, Georgia. So that gave me over 1,400 lunch boxes and thermoses. And so then it was time to call the Smithsonian and find out what they were doing. And then I met a man named David Shape with the Smithsonian, and he was handling the lunchbox collection of the Smithsonian. And he decided that, well, I need to come down to Columbus and see what you got to help with the Smithsonian collection. And so he did. He came down, and of course I called the news media, and I was in broadcasting at the time. I was in the radio business. And all the TV stations and the newspaper came, and here's somebody from the Smithsonian. They come all the way to Columbus, Georgia to see what? Lunchboxes. So it was pretty cool, and we made all the TV stations, radio stations, and front page of the newspaper, Smithsonian has come to Columbus, Georgia. And I took the director of the Columbus Museum, invited him to have dinner with David Shade and myself. We went out to dinner that night, and it was really nice. So, and then David went over and visited the Columbus Museum here in Columbus, which was a rare opportunity to have the Smithsonian come to your museum.
Absolutely.
So it was great, and in the interview with David Shade in the news media, he brought out the fact that it's very unusual that here we are in Columbus, Georgia, number one, but number two, Mr. Woodall is donating 20 lunch boxes and thermoses to the Smithsonian, but we're also buying some additional ones that we need for the museum. So it's not often that we actually make purchases for the Smithsonian, but we're doing that in this case. So that was really thrilling. That was really quite an honor. And so that was the beginning. And then I did the book, as I said I would, Ms. Carr. And in the front of the book, the Illustrated Encyclopedia and Price Guide of Metal Lunchboxes by Schiffer, there's a dedication to Bob Carr and his family. So everything worked out good, and it's been a wonderful road, such a surprise on all the publicity that we've gotten over the last, since 1990. We've got just tons of publicity. We were big write-up and pictures in the Washington Post, which is a major newspaper. Then, of course, Atlanta Journal and the Birmingham, Alabama papers all over the country, and radio stations all over the country would call and I'd do interviews everywhere, even foreign countries. In England, I did interviews on radio in England and Argentina, and it's just been amazing. And so his people come in almost daily from somewhere. We've had people from all over the world that have come here to see this little funky lunchbox museum. It's been great.
So how many lunchboxes do you think you have here?
Well, I'm glad you said how many do I think I have, because I don't know exactly.
Okay.
The reason I don't know exactly is because what's unique about our it's the Lunchbox Museum. What's unique about it is any duplicate that we have, if a person comes in and they remember that they want the box that they had when they were in school, if we have a duplicate, I'll actually sell it to them. So any duplicates are for sale, so it's really an interactive museum. And it's a memory museum, it's a time capsule museum. And I was telling Beverly earlier that I've been to the Louvre, I've been to the Smithsonian, and I've been to major museums around the world. And I never once, in all the museums that I went to, I never saw anybody actually cry, come to tears in any of the museums that I've been. But in our museum, here at the Lunchbox Museum, the memories is such a time capsule. And when that time capsule opens up, I've seen there have been people come here that actually brought tears to their eyes on the box that they remembered, bringing back certain memories.
So Beverly, how many lunchboxes have you worked on?
I have worked on probably anywhere between 350 and 400.
Okay.
And I used to tell Elmer all the time, I'd say, I was destined to do this because I was born in 1951 when the first lunchbox came out. And I was lucky to be able to go to art school and come back to Nashville and then start working for Aladdin in 1974. And got to do a lot of the lunch boxes that Alan has in here. So yeah, yesterday I had a tough time walking around myself because you tear up when you see you put so much work into them. And not only you live the characters for many years, because I illustrated lunchboxes for 32 years. And so being there in Nashville, I did get to travel all over the United States from the time I was 21, 22 years old. A lot of people didn't know what I did or where I was at the time. And I realized I was a very, very lucky person to be able to have worked under Elmer Linhart. And he had kind of taken me in as his protege, I guess you'd say, and kind of, he told me once, he said, Beverly, he said, I realized when I met you that you were going to make it and I could take you, you were so talented. He said, he would say, I think you can do just about anything. And so his wife told me after he died in the 80s that she said he never did tell me how good I was, because he said he knew that if he did, that he said I had more talent in my little finger than a lot of artists, but he said if he did, that I would quit striving for excellence. And that's one thing that he required, and Disney required, and Sesame Street required. So it was a great ride for me as well. Him collecting and starting to collect just as I was pretty much, then working for Thermos. So I worked for both the lunchbox companies. A lot of the artists did not. And I think a lot of people, from what I've been told in the last 5 to 10 years, people didn't know that a lot of us were still alive. I'm definitely alive, and that was a great ride, And it made you stay young. I was constantly, I could go anywhere and talk to kids. I would talk to kids that were friends of my family, and me and the kids would have a great time talking about all the new characters, a lot of which were I could not talk about. One example, Gremlins. There were several that were hush hush, and you could not. We worked a year ahead to create the characters and the boxes. And one thing that was unique about us, and Elmer really started, was we wanted to tell a story, just like he was talking about the TV series, or whether it was a movie or whatever it was. We wanted the lunchbox to tell a story, and so that the child would carry it to school and remember the story of the character itself, but also the characters of the lunchbox. Then when in the 80s, when the there were problems with the metal lunch boxes being used as weapons in Florida. Florida banned the metal lunch boxes, and that started where the metal lunch boxes started becoming extinct, and we switched to the plastic, and we started doing labels.
And I think that was, Rambo was the last metal lunchbox.
Rainbow was the last for Thermos, and Thundercats was the last for Aladdin.
All right, yes.
So, and then we were also going into a disposable society. So our companies started thinking, well, what we need to do so that everybody could carry a new lunchbox. But the only thing was, it didn't tell the story anymore. It just had the one panel to tell what the character was, but that story was missing. And we enjoyed, creating it. And that was one of the things that we did with the metal lunch boxes too for the licensors, is we didn't just pick up materials from them. We created our own from their characters after watching the films and the shows and different things. We created our own lunchbox. Another example of that was Disney. We created a lot of Disney characters, or lunchboxes with Disney characters, and then finally they came to us and said, we want a Disney character lunchbox that has all of the characters. That was the first time they ever let us do that. So Elmer said, hey Bev, I want you to do the commemorative kit, is what we call it. And I happened to be working on Disney Parade down in Disney World, and decided that that's what I would do. And so as I was walking through, I had been sketching several nights and trying to figure out what I kind of wanted to do, and I thought of a storybook theme. And then I got to thinking, well, as I was walking through the park, I heard the train. When that whistle went off, I knew exactly what I was going to do, and that's how I came up with Disney Express. So I've had people often ask me what was the longest or hardest kit or the best kit I had fun working on, and that was definitely one of them. And it took me longer, probably twice as long as any kit that I had created the artwork on, to be able to finish it, because it had so many characters on it.
Right.
So anyway, but Gremlins was another one that was fun. I worked with Spielberg a lot, and I worked with him on Annie. And then I've always had a love for animals and sports in my life, and came from that. And so, as you will see, that a lot of the lunch boxes include animals. Like I did the Fox and the Hound, and we would say, okay, Bev, you're going to do Fox and the Hound. There was one called Little Friends. We used to do a lot of non-licensed characters, especially when we would export them to other countries, so that we didn't have to pay a royalty fee on those. And that way, we could keep the cost of the lunchbox down. The whole fascination of working under Elmer Lenhart, who was probably one of the greatest lunchbox artists, who had freelanced for 35 years from Chicago, and then moved to Nashville the last 5, and then he recommended me as the one to take over his position when he retired. And I was honored and thrilled, and I always basically called him my Merlin. And Elmer worked for me 5 years. As I said, I wanted him to continue to work if he wanted to, and so he and I were good buds, and we had a lot of fun creating them, working on them. A lot went into just doing the illustrations on the lunch boxes, which a lot of the kids today don't see that because it's all computerized. And
I got a question.
yeah,
About how many employees were at Aladdin at the time when you were working there?
there were over the whole entire company, there were 7,000 employees.
Wow.
And,
Well,
but,
see, this museum really is a tribute to all the people that worked at
Absolutely.
Aladdin and also Thermos and King Seeley. And,
absolutely.
you know, this is a tribute to all those people.
Absolutely. And in the in the art department, there were only about 5 of us, and in the art department that created all of the lunch boxes, and we created on a yearly basis, and we worked a year ahead. So it was like kind of looking into a crystal ball, because we had already seen it, and by the time it came out, it was old to us
Right,
already.
right.
And then there were lunch boxes that we and licenses that we looked at that was marketing decisions as to whether we took it or not, or the license. There were some we lost out on, both companies, but it was a competitive business, and so that was one of the good things too, was to be able to work with all of these art directors all over the United States that handle the Sesame Streets, that handle the all the Disney characters and stuff. So you built bonds with these art directors as well, So the process itself took quite a while, because you went into ideas, concepts, pencils, and then we would do prototypes, and that's what we used for our catalog shots. And then from there we went and did the actual artwork, and it is huge. The originals were fairly large, and the bands were really large. That
And we have
worked
some
on.
of the bands hanging right over here.
Yes, yes.
By the way, I've got a question. Do you know who produced the Toppy lunchbox? Toppy the elephant. That was for top value stamps.
Right.
It was in 1957. And do you know?
It's there should be a copyright line on it. I'm not sure whether we did or not.
It's just one of the rarest lunchboxes today
Absolutely.
as far as collectibles go, which is unusual.
Yes.
And so we need to do a little research and
On
find
that.
out who produced Toppy the
Now
elephant.
there is a byline on that. There's at the bottom of it, so we can look at that and we can go from that.
Yes, we should.
Because Aladdin always had theirs on it, and Thermos always had their logos on it. So that way, because we were the 2 lunchbox gurus, basically in the industry.
Right. Cool.
That's one of my questions. Where is the rarest lunchbox in the museum?
It would be the Toppy,
What was the question?
the rarest.
The rarest lunchbox in the museum.
The rarest today of all the lunchboxes is Toppy, the top value stamp
Yeah.
elephant from the Kroger stores put that out back in 1957.
And then of course you got your Hopalong Cassidys that were some of the first ones. They're hard to find,
Oh, yeah.
very extreme. And then another thing is that a lot of your lunch boxes that we didn't produce as many, or for different reasons. The fewer there are, the harder, the more valuable, that they are. And then there were some that we worked on that didn't come to finalization. And I'll give you an example of that. I worked on the Magnum PI, and I did a concept, and then I did a mock-up because we were going to move on that one, and then we were told that we weren't because of some things going on with the show and Ferrari at the time.
Right.
So that one was,
Yeah.
so we had quite, every now and then we run into that, and but I often had the question too about King Seeley, since I worked for Aladdin.
Uh-huh.
Were we super competitive? No, we had a lot of fun at the toy fairs and stuff, you know, and I mean, not that we all ran around together that much, but I mean, we were very cordial. We had fun, and Woody and some of the guys, you know, that I were art directors, you know, and
Right.
different ones that worked for them. We
So
would cut up
many
and carry on.
people. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't realize that it was that big.
Mm-hmm.
That was so large.
Well, see, Aladdin not only did lunch boxes, created lunch boxes. See, we had the Stanley bottles,
Mhm.
we had the hospital trays, we had the
Yes.
airline trays,
Mm-hmm.
we had the mugs and the tumblers. We had a lot of divisions of Aladdin. We had the lamps, and
Sure.
what really came from Chicago when they first moved to Nashville were the lamps and the kerosene heaters.
Mm-hmm.
And then the lunch boxes became
Secondary.
secondary. And the other thing too, the lunch boxes were lost leaders.
Mhm.
You know, they weren't there to make money. They were there to get interest, you know, for the kids, and it was interest to get into different places like the bottles and kerosene lamps and heaters were all in the hardware store, so that's where the
Right.
lunch boxes went.
Sure.
And so then when they finally negotiated when Walmart opened, our marketing team and everything got with Walmart, and then all of a sudden, boom, here go, you know, the lunch boxes. So, and we had all different kinds of lunch boxes. We had the metal, we had the plastic, we went into the bags, and thermal bags. We had you know, we couldn't do backpacks and stuff, so there was another license for that. So,
Right.
but we tried to create different things. And then since we were all into insulation, like the trays and the hospital trays, we were trying to create other insulated products that would work, microwavable products. So our offices, our art department was next to the engineering department that worked on it. And then when we were in R&D, which was research and development building, so they didn't know what to do with us artists, so they stuck us in the back of the building. But it was good because when we were doing prototypes or making prototypes or whatever, we would be working with them. And so, you know, it worked out real well.
That's great.
So, I'm just fascinated that you got so excited and got started doing this. You know, I thought people I knew would do this, and
Well, it just needed to be
just-
preserved.
Yeah.
So many people. And that's why we're doing the Royal Crown Cola Museum that will be opening July the 10th, hopefully, of this year. And because it affected so many people, thousands and thousands of people, their lives
sure.
depended on Royal Crown Cola. And not only in Columbus here, where it was discovered back in 1905, but across the entire United States and even foreign countries. And even today, Royal Crown Cola is being sold, I know, like in the Czech Republic, it is
Yeah.
probably the best-selling soft drink in the Czech Republic, Royal RC Cola. And it's kind of ironic that the founder of all of this, Claude
Right.
Aiken Hatcher, it started back in 1905, and we have all that history in the museum. But it's amazing that they actually have his picture on the bottles that are being shipped to the Czech Republic right now. And we have some of those on display in the museum.
That's exciting. That is really exciting. When Alan was talking about Smithsonian, the Smithsonian contacted me several times, and I had the list. I had put together the list of who did every lunchbox,
Oh, wow.
and
Yeah.
I was working on that at Aladdin because we were trying to preserve the artwork before I was left there. When Elmer died, I had to go in and figure all of that out, you know. And most of us, you know, had, well, of course, we couldn't put our names on it, but we were artists by hire. But I made a list, and I have that list at my house somewhere in a black, I called it my Bible. It's a black book.
Yeah.
And So I gave that to them and gave it to the Smithsonian, and then they contacted me as well after I left there, and wanted to know a bunch of information, and that they were putting together some things, and then NBC Nightly News wanted to know how I created the lunchboxes, so they flew me to Washington, and we did a TV thing, asking me questions about different things and how we did the lunchbox and how we created them, how they were made, where they were printed. The labels were printed all over. There were 3 different locations, and I moved them to Memphis because it was closer. And then Chicago Litho was who printed our metal kits, and then we would bring them to our company, and our company would stamp them out. And then we did our own bottle art there, and Elmer created the process to do the bottle artwork. So we did all of that there, and but they did take me to the Smithsonian. I did get to see that.
That's great.
And so that was really, really interesting. And again, I got to cry again when I walked in and saw all of them up on the wall, kind of like you did. And
The Smithsonian, they actually back in the 90s had a traveling exhibit of their lunch boxes. And they traveled to major cities all over America, displaying their collection from the Smithsonian. That was really neat. I was invited to go and speak at a lot of different locations.
That's great.
In Alabama, in Georgia and South Carolina.
Yeah.
It was really neat.
Well, in Aladdin, we tried to do that for our departments there. Had talked about doing that. Human resources, we talked about doing that. And I said something to Mr. Johnson, wouldn't it be neat to, travel around? Well, at that time we contacted galleries and stuff, and they weren't interested. But that was, earlier years.
Right.
And so then I'm sure that when I was talking to Smithsonian, I said, well, I hate that because it's a lost art.
That's right.
And so, I hate that's happened. And then I taught in 2 colleges in Nashville, graphic design, and I would discuss with them how artwork was done, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s versus, going to the computer and going to the Mac. And it was a whole different process, and they didn't quite understand. And I would talk about when we would do overlays and cut each color. We would do the line work and then cut each color it was going to be printed on top.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that it's like lost art, and that is another one of the reasons that I was so attracted to the Dick Tracy and the Green Hornet and started picking up all these boxes because of the great artwork on the boxes. These are great pop art collectible pieces.
Well, I'm just so thankful you did that. And how I got to know you and know about you was a friend of mine named Jerry, and he was so fascinated as you. I went to high school with him. Alan really knew I did art, but he wasn't sure what. But Scott Bruce sent me a book that he had done, and then I had worked with him on some things, and he would want information and would call me. And then I got to looking out there, because the last, I'd say 10 or 15 years, I've had health issues. My parents I took care of, too, and then I was trying to make a living, doing different things, and other artwork. And as I started pulling them, I started seeing all these art books come out. Lunchbox books. I ordered yours. And so we got to talking about it. Jerry started doing a bunch of research, and the next thing I know, he's got all these, and he said, well, why aren't you on Facebook? I said, well, because I'm teaching, and so therefore I stay off of Facebook. And you just kind of, that was a part of me that I loved. It was a great time in my life. And I just kind of let things go for a while.
Yeah.
And Jerry says, no, you need to be back out there. You need to be back out there. And so since then, he's ordered different ones because I gave one to my mother, every one that I did, and I kept one. And someone stole all my mother's. And my mother had Alzheimer's and cancer for the last 5 years, but her last 5 years. And so they disappeared.
Right.
And so then there were some of mine that I did not have. And so Jerry started going and looking around the country and finding some. Well, then he would contact these collectors, and someone would say, "Oh yeah, we know that's Beverly Burge did that." And he'd say, "Yeah," and he said, "Well, I don't even think she's even alive anymore." And he said, "Oh yeah, she's alive." He said, "I just saw her yesterday."
Wow.
And he said, "But I'm getting this for her, you know." And so then some of the collectors, the one in San Diego, is wanting me to come out there, and I said, "Well, we'll see." But I just, I like traveling, and so that since I've retired, I've been kind of traveling the United States. I went to, got to go to Europe a couple of years ago, and then when the pandemic hit, I did a little low. So, but now I'm kind of getting back out and traveling, and so one of the first places we talked about coming to, after Jerry talked to you last year, was to come here. And so I said, "Jerry, all right, I'm ready." I said, "Let's call Mr. Woodall and see if it's okay if we come down there." And so you were so gracious and everything on the phone.
Thank you.
And said, "Come on." And I said, "I don't think he thought I really would come, but."
I'd like to tell the folks out there, the easiest way to find us is everybody's got a phone, and they all have one of these. All they have to do is just ask the phone, "Where is the Lunchbox Museum?"
The address for the River Market Antiques and Lunchbox Museum is 3218 Hamilton Road, Columbus, Georgia, 31904.
Right, so if you're in Australia or Africa or India or down home in Alabama somewhere, wherever you are in the world, if you just ask your phone, "Where's the Lunchbox Museum?" it'll get you right to us here in Columbus, Georgia.
That is great. That is great. And Alan, he just lives in Peachtree.
Right.
That's right.
And I says, "Oh, I haven't been to Columbus, Georgia, but I'm coming."
Yeah.
So this has been a great experience, and it's fascinating, and it's bring back a lot of memories with Elmer and all the time I spent with him.
Great.
He was a great guy, and very talented, and
So this is a tribute to him and to you and all those folks.
all the folks and all the other artists that worked under me, and some of them are gone.
And I hope the ones that are still here, their families will bring them here to see the collection.
Well, I hope so, and I'll have to let some of them know. Some of them I employed. One of them, Bruce Matthews, he did the McDonald's kit for me. He worked for me for 2 years, and then I had another one that went to high school with us that worked for me for about 4 years, and she died with cancer. She was our actually high school mascot, and so there's a lot that are gone, but there's a few still around. So
and their families.
Yeah, and their families, and so I will let them know, and I appreciate all your hospitality and just letting us come in here and look around. And
every time I do it, it's fun. It's a great experience every time.
That's great. That's great. Well, it was a great time in my life, and I used to tell my mother. My mother was always fun to be around, and she would always say, "When I grow up, this is what I'm going to do," And I would say, because she started playing golf with me at 72.
Wow.
And so I said, that's what I would say about characters around here, you know, because I lived them so much
Sure.
that they became such a part of me that I stayed a kid. And if anybody's been around me much, they know I'm still a kid at heart. So I said, you know, I'm like my mother. When I grow up, this is what I'm going to do next.
Right.
So it's been great. And I thank Alan Henry for even requesting this.
Yes.
Because he said, hey, you reckon he would let us, you know, do this? And I said, I'll ask him, you know, let me ask and see what Mr. Woodall says. So
You don't have to twist my arm very much for publicity.
But I want to thank Alan for
Absolutely.
being here with us and jumping at the thing to, you know, when I mentioned it, he said, I'm coming. And of course, I told Alan, I said, well,
Alan, I hope Alan will come back and do the Royal Crown Cola Museum.
July
Wait.
10th.
I mentioned it to him.
Okay.
And I told him, I said, well, that's the plan right now. So he's real good about that. He did our 50-year reunion. He's done so many things in Atlanta.
Mhm.
And he's a very talented guy in video. And so I appreciate him and his wife Becky and Jerry for kind of pushing me back out there, getting me
Right.
going again, because a lot of people say, oh yeah, Beverly drew all of her life, you know, that's what they think. Well, she was an artist, you know, so, but it was a great time in my life.
There you go.
So, and I got to use my talents, and like I told my brother, he's a banker, but like I told my brother, I said, I'm in the Smithsonian.
There you go.
So, I'm in the Lunchbox Museum in Columbus, Georgia. I met with Alan Woodall, who owns it, and has done all the collections. And guess what? I'm home. Here are a lot of the lunch boxes that I have located down here that I do have at home, but that it's fascinating to see all of the artwork and all of the lunch boxes being remembered in history. And it was a great time in my life. And I'm in now 2 museums. The world's largest lunchbox museum here in Columbus, Georgia, and also the Smithsonian. So I'm still reliving my childhood, and hopefully continue that. And it was a fun, creative profession for many years for me, and I value it and thank my mom and dad especially for giving me the chance to be able to do this and push me to do it, and having worked with fabulous people and knowing a lot of the, seeing a lot of the collectibles now and a lot of the people who recognize artwork and what went into it, and that all the lunchboxes told a story not only of the series itself, but also the people who created them.
Are y'all ready? Are y'all ready?
We're ready.
Let me do it one more time.
All right.
Okay.